Welcome to a special episode of Dreamcatchers. I'm your host, Lauren McCumber. With me today is Dayayage Alfred. He's a Kahnawake writer and professor. Welcome to the show.
Segu.
Segu. So Dayayage was recently featured on CBC's show, a 4-part series called The Eighth Fire, and he had some interesting things to say about education, and I just thought it'd be really great to have him on the show to discuss some issues that Kahnawake students face. So let's start with Eighth Fire. What exactly was that show about?
Well, I think it was CBC's attempt to have some sort of a positive image of Native people, and they've been working on it for quite a while. I remember being interviewed for that last summer, and I know they kind of planned it for a year, at least a year before that. So I guess the CBC kind of responding to the criticism they get a lot about all the negative portrayals of Natives. So there's always the problems and the kind of things they show, like Attawapiskat and all that. And I think what they decided to do was let's have a mini series that shows all the positive things happening among Aboriginal people, so-called, in Canada. So I think that's what the thrust was.
So the episode that you were featured on, what were some of the topics covered, and what was your viewpoint?
The main topic of the episode I was on was urban Aboriginal people. So sort of like Natives coming into the city. And I think the tagline was, we've been neighbors for 300 years, it's time to meet each other, something like that. And so my role on it, I was kind of like a naysayer. they had a whole bunch of happy stories about all great things that Natives are doing in the city, how they're really, creative people making a life, and how we should all just kind of like get along. And I had the voice kind of reminding people that no, not everything's going so well. Natives who think that they can just move in the city and everything's going to be all rosy are forgetting that all of our power and spiritual essence is out on the land. And what about land claims anyway? Those kind of perspectives. Mm-hmm.
So how does that perspective apply to Kahnawake students who are going to outside universities to get their education?
Well, I don't think that you can go and get a real proper education today in a university environment in a program that's not rooted in Indigenous teachings and experience. And as an Indigenous person, you expect to get all of the teachings and all the knowledge from the outside world, but not at the expense of cutting yourself off from your own culture and your own growth. Because no matter what level of knowledge you have of the language or of our ceremonies or anything like that, everybody's always learning, and you can't stop that learning. When you go to university, it's kind of like what you need is a program that really gives you an opportunity to develop as a Ungwe and to gain all the knowledge that the outside has. And there's a few of those in Canada, but not too many. Mm-hmm. And so I always tell Native students that they ought to be careful about the programs they choose, because for the most part, Native education in Canada is pretty assimilatory. And you have to really work hard to not be drawn into the idea that once I get an education, my responsibility is to go out into that larger world and make my way, which is assimilation, basically. Mm-hmm. Instead of thinking that my responsibility is to learn what I can so I can be someone that helps and contributes to the restoration of the strength of our Native communities.
Well, the education system being what it is, how does a Kahnawake youth maintain that sense of culture and identity, even though they're in a white institution? By
coming to our program at the master's level? No, just kidding. That's one option. I have to say, I think that we're doing it right, because I'm the person that designed this one particular program. We'll see over time. The feedback has been really good from Native students or from Native communities that we worked with in British Columbia, and actually all over the country, but we're located in British Columbia, about the way we're doing it. But if you don't go to that kind of program or that particular program, the responsibility is on you as an individual to demand more of that institution. So most universities offer you the opportunity to have a degree in a particular field. Some of them have Native studies courses and all that. But it's up to the student to say, hey, I want the opportunity while I'm doing this to relate that to my own experience. I want the opportunity to learn from Native teachers too. I want to have Indigenous knowledge in my experience. And you don't have the opportunity to do that unless you demand it.
Yeah. Well, one way that I try to implement my culture in my program, which is journalism, is to do stories on Kahnawake, things that concern Indigenous people. So is that one way that students can sort of take a step in the right direction?
Well, yeah, I think when you say that, what I'm hearing is, well, I'm staying connected. to my community. I'm not just being swept up in whatever the university is putting in front of me as a pathway, right? So you're taking your education, but you're applying it in Kahnawake, and you're also, by doing that, bringing the Kahnawake perspective into that program. And so you're kind of doing what I'm talking about. The challenge is, though, when you get at the higher level, like say you go to Ryerson for a master's in journalism, which I understand is like the best school in Canada for journalism, it's pretty assimilative because there's such a demand on your time and your energy to learn the technique and to perform at that level that it becomes pretty hard to maintain to do what you're doing, right? Unless you're maybe running into a professor, or if that program is kind of structured to allow you to do it. So that's what I mean by demanding it. Like students have to demand the institution to respect them as Indigenous peoples and not just as another citizen.
Can you give me an example of someone who's actually done that and succeeded?
I can tell you someone who's kind of challenging the standard way of doing things at, let's use Ryerson. I'll keep talking about it because I was just there in Toronto. Okay. They had a public policy school, journalism school, and so forth. And then maybe, I think a couple of years ago, they started this Center for Indigenous Governance. And so they have this professor there, Pam Palmer, friend of mine, who has come from government experience, and she's a Mi'kmaq and so forth. And so she's coming in there now and trying to say, well, it's not just about teaching people how to be better bureaucrats. It's teaching people how to be better bureaucrats, yes, but also how to relate their education, just like I said, to their experience as Indigenous people, and to find a way to connect it to Indigenous struggles. And so she's now a faculty member kind of fighting in that system to try to create some space so that Native students can come in and do it. And so that's at the faculty level. In terms of students, well, I could list like dozens of students. We've had 60 graduates coming through our program so far.
And what's your program again? It's
called Indigenous Governance, and it's a master's and PhD program for people who already have a level of training, like in journalism and political science, something, but want to come and kind of have another level of training in terms of, well, now that I have this specialty, how do I operate as an Indigenous leader in that specialty?
And that's offered in Victoria, BC.
Yeah, it is. Okay. Yeah.
Quite the travel. But we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have more with Dayai again.